It's been a couple of minutes since I last heard it, but I know we're definitely not alone. It's impossible to say how much time we have left, but I'll try and document everything that has happened so far. It's my duty, in case we don't make it out alive, to explain how it all began. For 2 weeks, the kids at my son's school have been preparing for the upcoming Halloween party. It might surprise some of you, but Halloween wasn't that popular in our neck of the woods due to it being a part of a Bible Belt. So naturally, the idea met some resistance, but in the end, common sense prevailed. Whatever some folks might think, it was not an event put together to celebrate dark forces, just an innocent party that allowed kids to play pretend for one night. Earlier today, at 5 p.m, I was standing in the hallway waiting for Caleb. Poor little guy had been nervous all week. Not only was it the first time he had ever attended a party, but he was also going to ask his crush, Nora, to dance. While it was endearing, I couldn't help but feel sad that his mother wasn't with us. Caleb was 3 years old when Amy passed away in an accident. She had just left work, walking on foot back to her car, when a drunk driver mowed her down on the crosswalk. Her injuries were so severe that she died before the ambulance arrived. Time might heal most wounds, but the void left by a loved one never fully heals. I checked the time. 10 minutes had passed. What was taking so long? I looked up towards the stairs and was about to call out when Caleb finally stepped into view. He was sporting a skeleton onesie, the plastic mask resting on top of his head.
There you are. You ready to go?
I said. You think Nora is gonna like my costume? Caleb was visibly nervous.
I know she will. But hey, we gotta get going.
It was fairly dark when we finally got moving. On our way I could see that there were maybe 5 or 6 houses that were decorated, which was more than I had anticipated for our small town. As you might expect, there were no signs of any kids trick-or-treating. To my surprise, the parking lot was almost packed once we finally arrived. From behind the wheel, I could see adults with their kids inside the school cafeteria, which was where the festivities would take place. The windows were decorated with garlands depicting ghosts and bats, as well as grinning pumpkins alongside black and orange balloons. I turned off the engine and started reaching for the door.
All right, kiddo. You ready to?
Dad? I paused.
Yeah?
Do you think Mommy is with us now? I'm not a religious person, not even agnostic, yet I was too cowardly to tell him that his mother simply didn't exist anymore. Well, that's maybe not entirely true, as there was still a part of me that wished that she was still out there, somewhere. But that was just wishful thinking, a mental crutch that prevented me from breaking down whenever she was brought up.
Yeah, I know she is.
We embraced. Caleb sighed, content that his mother was still very much present. I felt horrible for lying yet again, but over the years I had convinced myself that I did it to protect him. Once we stepped out, I locked the doors before we began making our way towards the cafeteria. On either side of the entrance stood carved out pumpkins, their eyes and mouths glowing from the electric candles placed inside. Above them hung 2 glow-in-the-dark skeletons. Behind the glass portion of the door sat a poster addressing tonight's event. It read, Halloween Party, in big bold letters. Beyond information regarding entry fees, opening and closing times, etc., every classic monster, as well as some new ones I was unaware of, adorned the festive placard. Upon entering, we were greeted by Tom and Jenny, 2 of the parents that had graciously pitched in to help out. There wasn't a kid in sight that wasn't dressed up. Zombies, witches, ghosts, werewolves, everyone was there. As we had crossed the threshold, we were met by a tapestry of cobwebs, plastic pumpkins, and numerous other Halloween-related trinkets. On one of the walls hung several hand-drawn pictures of different monsters, phantasms, and beings. All the chairs and tables in the cafeteria had been cleared out to leave room for dance and play. The adults had also built a stall where kids could buy snacks. To the right, in the far corner, Alex, a guy whose little sister was in the same class as Caleb, was setting up the sound system. I went around, saying hello to everyone, while Caleb got together with some friends. The atmosphere was great, but it was then that an all too familiar voice cut through the nostalgia.
This is nothing more than an unhealthy fascination with evil.
It was none other than my old principal, Mr. Jones. Slowly, I turned around to face him. His cold grey eyes glared at me from underneath his greying, bushy eyebrows. I could swear that he was still wearing that same old suit from when I was young, still reeking heavily of stale cigarette smoke. Apart from his thinning scalp, he hadn't really changed. Still bitter and bumptious, a bona fide Mr. Scrooge. I forced a smile.
Can't be that bad, Mr. Jones. These kids seem to be enjoying themselves. And at the end of the day, isn't that what's most important?
Mr. Jones furrowed his brow. His stare became more intense, and for a second it felt as if I was back in the principal's office, awaiting my judgment. To him I was a pest, an insect he could obliterate with ease. Then he grinned wide, exposing his nicotine-yellow teeth.
Well, if it isn't Daniel Price, how you've grown. So, this kind of nonsense amuses you? Can't say that I'm all that surprised.
The old fossil remembered me, even after all those years. I strained my jaw tightly before responding.
I'm impressed you still remember.
The old bastard's smile grew even wider, exposing his dentures, a mishmash of quicksilver and gold. He then looked over the room, disgust glimmering in his cold stare.
Just clean up once you're done. I'll be back just to make sure things are done accordingly. See you again, Mr. Price.
I nodded before excusing myself and left to talk with some of the parents. He could probably tell that I was irritated, judging from his smug smirk he gave in response. Thankfully, Mr. Jones left the vicinity. The Halloween party could finally begin. The cafeteria soon transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. The kids danced while indulging sugary treats. However, it didn't take long before we needed to refill, and I got tasked with fetching more snacks and drinks from the boys' locker room over at the school's gym. I complied, and after receiving the keys, I left. It was already dark outside and raining slightly. My footsteps echoed across the deserted schoolyard. The moment the music had more or less faded, an uncanny silence took its place. For whatever reason, I was on edge. Once I reached the building, I looked around to ensure myself that I was alone. Call it a sixth sense, but already at that point, I felt that something was off. However, I ended up brushing off the feeling before unlocking and entering the gym. The fluorescent tubes blinked to life after I flipped the light switch, revealing the dimly lit interior. I looked around. To my right, the girls' and boys' locker rooms. To the left, a corridor veering to the right, leading you straight to the gym teacher's office, the gym itself, as well as a door leading out to the gym's athletic track. I went straight to the boys' locker room. Once there, I picked up 2 cases of drinks and 2 bags filled with snacks. It was when I was about to leave that I heard what sounded like someone fiddling with a door. I stopped and listened. I hadn't mistaken myself. What I heard was the rattling sound of a door handle being violently yanked. Whoever they were trying to force themselves in through the back door. Carefully, I put down what I was carrying. The racket showed no sign of letting up. Although I had no backup, I decided to go and investigate. As I was about to turn the corner, the sound ceased immediately. I peeked. Both doors were closed, and I couldn't see anyone beyond the frosted glass portion of the back door. I touched the door handle, just to make sure it wasn't damaged. Everything seemed to be fine. But just to make sure, I unlocked and opened the door just a crack. The athletic track was shrouded in shadows, and even with the ground lighting off, I could tell that the field seats were unoccupied. In the distance I could see a trail leading further away into an area cluttered with houses. I saw no movement. While locking the back door, I began recalling overhearing some of the parents complaining about teenagers hanging out around the school at odd hours, drinking beers and smoking. So that's what I chalked it up to. A bunch of bored teens. Relieved, I closed and locked the door. But as I was about to head back, someone started yanking at the handle again. I cursed under my breath and spun around. Behind the glass, I could see the distorted shape of a person. I couldn't make out any distinguishing features, but I could tell that their posture was odd. It seemed as if the shoulders were raised in a perpetual shrug. I'm not gonna lie, it freaked me out.
Back off before I call the police.
The second the word police left my mouth, the door handle stopped moving. I studied the figure, ready to call out again, when they started backing out of view. I'm not sure if it was the frosted glass warping my perception, but just before the individual disappeared, it looked as if they hitched up their shoulders even further. Clearly, I was seeing things. But just to make sure they weren't coming back, I yelled at them that I would be back, only this time I would not be alone. I didn't get a reply, which I at the time saw as a strong indication that they had left. After checking the door one last time, I went back and picked up the stuff I had come for. I locked up the gym and speed walked back to the cafeteria, every now and then looking over my shoulder just to make sure I wasn't being followed. No one there. While relieved, that same creeping feeling from before started finding its way back under my skin. Once I reached the cafeteria, I caught sight of Sam, one of the parents, smoking a cigarette. He must have heard me because he looked my way.
Where the hell have you been?
I didn't say anything at first, just asked him to keep the door open for me so that I could unload. Once I had unpacked, I stepped outside to talk to Sam. The incident over at the gym still lingered in the back of my head, pricking every nerve in my body. I needed something to take off the edge. I'd been smoke-free for 4 months, but ended up relenting, asking Sam if I could bum a smoke.
I thought you quit.
He replied, surprise in his voice. Having said that, he still handed me one. I thanked him, lit up, and took a deep drag. I felt better already.
Yeah, I did. But after what I went through, I really needed one.
What happened?
Sam said, now seemingly worried.
A couple of kids tried to get into the gym, but I told them off.
I took another drag.
But I gotta be honest, it was pretty creepy.
Sam chuckled, smoke escaping from his mouth and nostrils.
I get that, but hey, teens will be teens. They're probably just trying to mess with you. Hell, even I get bored of living in buttfuck nowhere at times.
Yeah, I guess.
I replied.
But don't you think we should go back just to check?
Maybe.
Sam scratched his chin.
But we should probably wait. Don't want to scare the kids, and besides, as long as we stick together, we're fine.
He was right, but I guess he could tell I was still somewhat on edge as he walked up to me and put a hand on my shoulder.
It's gonna be fine, David. But tell you what, if it makes you feel any better, how about me and Brady head over to the gym after we're done cleaning? Just take a quick gander, and if we notice anything, we'll call the cops, alright?
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
Reassured, we headed back inside, but before entering the cafeteria, I made sure to shove my mouth full with mint-flavored bubblegums to camouflage the smell from Caleb. The evening went on. Kids bounced around, high on sugar. Parents chit-chatted about work and upcoming vacations. At some point I see Caleb standing by himself, looking out one of the windows. A parent's worst fear kicked in. Did someone say something to upset him? I was well aware that bullying did happen at his school, but not to what extent. Quickly, I beelined across the dance floor while trying not to knock anyone over, straight towards Caleb. Once I reached him, I knelt down.
Hey, little man, you okay?
I half expected to see tears in his eyes, but when he looked at me, I could see that he was smiling.
Yeah? Why?
Taken aback, I replied,
Oh, nothing. What are you up to?
Without breaking eye contact and still smiling, he responds,
Talking with Mom.
Hearing my child claiming that he was speaking with his dead mother would have creeped out most parents. This wasn't the case for us though. In fact, shortly after his mother died, Caleb kept telling me that she still read him goodnight stories. Last time this happened was maybe 5 years ago. So in that regard, it was nothing too alarming, but his reply had thrown me off. Maybe he was speaking with his mother because he felt left out.
Okay, but don't you want to hang out with your friends instead of standing here? All alone?
But I'm not alone. Mom is outside. You always say that she's with us.
He then pointed at the window. Internally, I cursed myself for keeping up this charade for as long as I had.
Yeah, I know.
I sighed.
But I really think you should hang out with your buddies. Mom, she's not going anywhere, okay? Don't you think she would want you to have fun tonight? Also, weren't you supposed to ask Nora to dance?
The second her name was mentioned, Caleb ripped his gaze from the window and bolted into the crowd of kids, presumably to find Nora. Before he disappeared, I called out that I would tell Alex to change the music to something more suitable. I made my way to the improvised DJ booth, but soon realized no one was there to man it. After asking around, I found out that Alex was last seen outside, talking on the phone. Not wanting to keep my son waiting any longer, I went outside. Luckily, it didn't take long before I spotted Alex pacing around the parking lot, phone pressed tight to his ear. I stopped in my tracks and waited for him to finish his call before waving. The moment he hung up, he looked up and waved at me.
Hey, sorry about that. I was busy talking with my girlfriend. You good, Mr. Price?
I waved back and started walking towards him. Halfway, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. I stopped and turned to face the road leading up to the school area. It was a rather narrow, asphalted road, lined with light posts and a couple of houses. No lights were on in the windows. I was about to keep walking, but that was when I detected movement again. Just to make sure I wasn't imagining things, I looked again, and that's when I saw it. Something that I can't quite explain. Due to the darkness and the dull glow of the light posts, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. On first glance, it reminded me of a hunched over dog, but it was arching its back the way a cat does when feeling threatened. But the more I looked, the more puzzled I felt. Firstly, it was far larger than any dog or cat I had ever seen, maybe the size of an average male. Secondly, and I could be wrong, but it almost looked as if this animal was wearing clothing. No matter how hard I squinted my eyes, trying to discern any facial features, I couldn't make out its face. I'm not sure how long I had been standing there, completely perplexed, before I could make out Alex's voice. It sounded distant and far away, as if my head was encased in a soundproofed bubble.
Mr. Price? Are you alright?
My eyes remained locked on the odd animal, and I was about to call Alex's attention to that thing before it blended into the unlit environment. Something about how it moved, as if its limbs were disjointed and not attached in a way that made any logical sense, made me shiver. Once again, Alex tried to reach through to me, this time by grabbing my shoulders and shaking me while raising his voice.
David, what's wrong? Talk to me.
I'm not sure if it was that he dropped all formalities and called me by my first name that made me snap out of it, or if it was due to him using physical force. Whatever the case, it brought me back.
I saw something. An animal. Or... I don't know.
Alex immediately started looking around, but of course, he saw nothing. Whatever I had seen was either long gone or still lurking around somewhere, observing us. Concerned, Alex turned to me.
Well, whatever it was, it's not there anymore.
He paused and looked at me before continuing.
I know it might be a long shot, but Sam told me you caught a couple kids trying to get into the gym. You don't think it was one of them trying to prank you?
I looked at him in confusion, not sure what he was getting at. Alex carried on.
I know Halloween might not be your thing, but that's what it's all about. Scaring the crap out of each other. I bet they just wanted to get back at you.
He was right. For all I knew, what I had seen could very well have been one of those kids playing dress-up to scare me. Well, it sure as hell worked, and I felt quite embarrassed that Alex had been around to see my reaction. That said, he didn't rub it in my face. Instead, he perked up.
Anyway, you were looking for me?
I shot one more nervous look towards the darkness. Once I was assured we were alone, I turned back to him.
Yeah, about the music. You think you could change it up? Maybe put on something a bit slower?
Alex smiled, as if he knew exactly why I had made my request.
Ah, so Caleb is ready to ask Nora for a dance.
How did you?
Alex grinned and lit a cigarette, one that he had started on, but never finished.
Oh, I know that look. I've been DJing long enough to be able to tell. Caleb's been circling her ever since the music started playing. The little dude just hasn't found his window of opportunity yet.
I couldn't help but chuckle. It was sweet, and it made me soften up a bit, pushing away whatever odd experiences I'd had so far that evening. He was just like his old man when I was his age.
Great. So what do you say? Want to head back and create some magic?
I said and checked my phone. 1 hour until closing time. It was now or never.
Oh, you bet, Mr. Price. They don't call me Dr. Love for nothing.
He replied.
Excuse me?
I gave him a weird look.
It's a joke, Mr. Price. Anyway, we should probably get going.
Alex quickly put out his cigarette and set off towards the cafeteria. 5 minutes later, I Will Always Love You, the Whitney Houston version, not the Dolly Parton original, was streaming out of the speakers. The dance floor cooled down significantly, and even some adults joined in. I looked around for Caleb until I noticed that he was already dancing with Nora. He was definitely bolder than I was when I was his age. Frankly, I was impressed. I stood and watched as the witch and the skeleton gently rocked back and forth, smiling to myself. Whatever oddities I had experienced earlier that evening were now washed away. I felt content. The Halloween party had so far been a success. I slumped down in one of the empty chairs. I was just going to relax for the last hour or so before we could call it a night. That's when I noticed a small group of kids by one of the windows. Every now and then they would laugh while pointing at something out in the dark. I got curious and went over to them. When I was within arm's reach, a small girl dressed up as a princess turned and looked up at me. "You scared them away." She looked annoyed, a small scowl on her face. I didn't appreciate her tone, but kept it together.
Who are you talking about?
I asked calmly.
"The principal. He's so funny."
Another kid, dressed up as Dracula, chimed in. The principal? Was he back already? I couldn't help but feel nervous before brushing it off in order to remain cool and collected. The princess, whose name was Kelly, carried on.
He was dancing and jumping really high, higher than Spider-Man.
All of the children giggled, and as soon as the song changed to something more energetic, they swarmed back to the dance floor. I remained stood by the window, confused. Soon I was joined by Sam and his wife, Chrissy. I ended up telling them about what had just happened. Chrissy raised her eyebrows while Sam chuckled, seemingly amused, before saying,
They were just pulling your leg, man. Still rattled about the gym thing.
What gym thing?
Chrissy said, sounding concerned.
Nothing serious. Just some teens messing around.
Sam responded while discreetly winking at me.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just gonna head out and unwind. Be right back.
Although he didn't say it out loud, Sam was right. I needed to get my shit together. After taking a leak, I grabbed my jacket and left. The schoolyard was empty. It was eerily quiet outside, almost as if the entire town was holding its breath. I contemplated whether or not I should take a brisk walk around the cafeteria to clear my head, when I caught sight of someone. A person was peeking out from behind the main school building. Due to the lack of light, other than a single lamppost, I couldn't make out their face. That said, it was their posture that really caught my attention. From where I was standing, it almost looked as if they were leaning backwards, exposing their upper body from around the corner. At first I was puzzled, but then I remembered what Alex had said. I bet it was those teenagers again, trying to scare me. Didn't they have anything better to do? Time ticked by, without anyone saying anything. Eventually, I lost my patience.
What do you want?
I should have said more, come across as more imposing, but my newfound fearlessness fizzled out the second the figure took a step forward. In the dull light, I could see that they were walking backwards, towards me. It soon became apparent to me that this was someone I knew, someone I had actually talked to earlier. It was none other than Mr. Jones, my old principal. He was wearing that same old suit, but it somehow looked ill-fitted, as if it had become too small for his frame. But the strangest and most chilling observation was the way his shoulders were raised, elevated, making it appear as if he had no neck, just like the person I had seen over at the gym. Unless Mr. Jones had completely given in to the spirit of Halloween and decided to prank me, none of this made any sense. Whatever the case, I couldn't stop staring at him approaching. His arms and legs were moving in such a way that it seemed as if they had been broken and then healed without any medical support. It was like watching a rag doll, grotesquely yet somehow still gracefully sauntering across the schoolyard. My brain desperately tried to make sense of what I was seeing while backing away towards the cafeteria. I had almost reached the entrance when Mr. Jones all of a sudden spoke to me, but it wasn't his voice that I was hearing. It was one from beyond the grave, one that I hadn't heard in 6 miserable, agonizing years.
Daniel.
No, how was it even possible? Amy. I was there when they uncovered her body at the morgue. She was dead, torn and broken. Last time we spoke was when she had called me after work. Heading home now, see you soon, love you. I felt sick, delirious. The wound I was left with when she was ripped away from me ached and burned. Jones, that evil son of a bitch. My childhood years came flashing back. It was so long ago, but somehow he still hated me, wanted nothing more than to dig the knife deeper. That said, how could he mimic Amy so perfectly? It was then that something happened, something so terrifying that the fragmented mental images of Amy's mutilated corpse on the cold medical slab paled in comparison. With a wet, cracking sound, Jones's back contorted unnaturally, putting him in a revolting bridge position while still facing me. In some strange, uncanny way, it reminded me of when a cat is readying itself to pounce its prey. From this position, I could see his head. It had sunk down to chest level and was hanging limply, yet the eyes were fixed on me. The face was drained of color, closely resembled a mask. The skin was pulled taut around the cheeks and forehead, but looked almost baggy around the mouth, nose, and chin. It was when I saw the blood that I realized that this thing was wearing Mr. Jones's face as a crude disguise. The deathly pale lips slowly parted, and from that disgusting mouth, Amy's voice slithered, piercing my heart.
Daniel, come to me.
I didn't scream or beg for my life. I just started running. Behind me, I could hear the tearing of flesh and tissue, as if the human husk no longer could contain the thing wearing it. A blood-curdling shriek, an unearthly concoction of human and something else cut through the air. Before I managed to slam the door behind me, I heard the intense pattering of too many feet, appendages, or whatever it was, hammering against the pavement. Without making sure whether or not it was still chasing me, I started barricading the door with benches, chairs, whatever I could get my hands on. Suddenly, someone grabbed my shoulder, hard.
Daniel, what the hell is going on?
It was Sam. I hadn't heard him, nor the other parents approaching me. Judging from their wide-eyed gazes, they must have thought I was insane. However, that didn't budge me. I pulled away from Sam and proceeded building the barricade. My muscles burned with the rush of adrenaline. My heart was pounding like a drum, and my brain was screaming to me to keep going. Any attempts to reach through to me were ignored. Somewhere beneath the sound of angry and confused adults, I could hear the cries and sobs of children. I don't know how long it took before the noise of Alex's angry words got my attention.
Fucking hell, Daniel, you're scaring Caleb.
The second I heard my son's name, I let go of everything and turned around. Amidst a crowd of teary-eyed kids, I soon managed to make out Caleb's face. He was no longer wearing his skeleton mask. His eyes, filled with fear, bore into mine. Once I saw how scared he was, a pang of guilt surged through me. But that guilt was soon pushed aside when I, in my peripheral vision, noticed Sam started to pick apart the blockade. Without a second thought, I grabbed one of his arms.
Don't. Just leave it alone.
My voice was booming. He looked shocked, then angry, but I didn't care. I was willing to fight him to prevent whatever was out there from coming in. We stared at each other, but before any of us could say anything, a loud thump startled us. It had come from the roof. This was soon followed by the heavy scurries of something moving rapidly. As soon as that thing belted out yet another blood-curdling shriek, I sprung into action. I bolted straight towards my son, scooped him up, and made for the cafeteria. It didn't take long before everyone else got on the same bandwagon. The music was still blasting in the background, but everyone, including me, were too panicked to shut it off. Parents were discussing to the point of shouting, kids were crying, confused and scared, having no idea what the hell was going on. Something had to be done. I made my way to a secluded corner, still hanging on to Caleb. Once there, I grabbed my phone and called up Paul, a cop who lived in the area. Yes, I could have called 911, but for some reason I thought this was a better option. Maybe, just maybe, someone could come to our aid quicker. There are so many things that I could have done different, but I was desperate and above all, scared shitless. 3 signals later, he picked up.
Yeah, this is Paul.
Paul,
I shouted.
it's David Price. You gotta get over here. Bring the entire force. The military. I don't care. We need help.
It was quite on the line before Paul replied, noticeably taken aback.
Whoa, calm down. I can barely hear what you're saying. Can you please turn down the music? Where the hell are you?
I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing.
I'm at the kids' Halloween party. Someone...
Paul suddenly cut me off. I stopped talking, and I soon heard a sound on his end. It was faint at first, but it appeared as if someone was ringing his doorbell. Paul sighed.
Damn it. Can you hold on? I gotta get this. Hang tight.
Still on his cell phone, he made his way to the front door.
Paul, please. We really need your help. Can't you just...
Paul didn't reply. Instead, he unlocked the door and opened it. Then, for whatever reason, he went quiet.
Hello? You still there?
I said, now lowering my voice. A few more seconds ticked by before I could make out a voice, but it wasn't Paul. It was an elderly woman saying something unintelligible.
Paul, what's going on?
Finally, he responded, but his tone was strange. If I were to describe it, he sounded dismayed. Who was he talking to?
David,
He stopped. I wasn't sure, but it almost sounded as if he was on the verge of tears.
Paul,
I spoke softly, as to not push him over the edge.
who's at the door?
It's Mom. She has come home. I felt a lump of shock and disgust clog up my throat.
But that's impossible. She's...
Suddenly, an inhuman scream erupted through the speaker, after which the call ended abruptly. It had been so violent, so loud, that I had almost lost my grip around Caleb. I couldn't believe what Paul had just said seconds ago. You see, his mother had died of cancer about a year ago. For crying out loud, I attended the funeral. In my confusion, I looked around, seeing that other people were trying to make calls as well. But for whatever reason, it was as if they couldn't get through. I could overhear them saying that it was as if something was blocking the signal. I checked the phone again. I had a signal, but no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't reach anyone. Seconds ticked by. I could feel the pressure in the air, the agitation and the terror. The cafeteria was now a pressure cooker boiling with all of our fears. And then all hell broke loose. The first thing that set it all off was the sound of exploding glass. One of the windows had been blown out by some unseen force. People started screaming. After that, everything happened so quickly, but what I saw will forever be scarred into my retina. Something, I can't describe exactly what, reached in and grabbed Chrissy. In horror, I watched as she, kicking and screaming, was being dragged through the broken window. Some of the adults rushed to rescue her, but they froze in their tracks the second a disfigured appendage slithered into view. The limb, or whatever it was, started digging its way into Chrissy's throat, distorting her terrifying screams into something I couldn't possibly describe with words. There was nothing we could do other than witness her disappearing into the night. But the worst was yet to come. I had hoped that she had died, thus ending her suffering, but that thing wasn't done yet. A loud thud resonated as Chrissy was slammed against the roof, which was followed up by her agonizing screams for help. Somehow, she was still alive and breathing, but not for long. Once more, her shrieks became warped, more high-pitched, as if her vocal cords were being stretched. All the while this was going on, it sounded as if she was being skinned alive and gutted open like a fish, the wet sound of internal organs spilling out over the rooftop. It didn't take long after the scream had died down that another horrifying sound picked up. The scurrying of too many feet making its way towards the window, straight towards us. Poor, helpless Chrissy hadn't sated its appetite. No, its hunger was bottomless, and now it was on the hunt. With Caleb crying in my arms, I started making my way towards the first hiding spot that crossed my mind, the kitchen area and the rooms beyond. Since it was just the two of us, I decided that we could seek refuge in the bathroom. The storage and break room could house whoever else that managed to make it. The moment I closed the bathroom door, I locked it and sunk down to the floor with Caleb still clutching his arms and legs around me. While sitting there, I carefully clasped my shaking hands over his ears, trying to shield him from the mayhem outside. Beyond the thin wooden bathroom door, chaos reigned. That abomination was slaughtering everything in its path. No one was spared, whether you were an adult or a child. God, the poor children. I can't even begin to, nor do I want to, describe what it sounded like. All the while the massacre was being carried out, the music was still playing in the background, adding insult to the unspeakable bloodshed. And for a second, it all felt like a sick joke, a farce played on humanity. How I wish that was true. But as soon as the sound of my boy crying and my own silent tears shortly followed, I was soon thrown back to the wolves. While silently hushing him and trying to remain composed, the stench of blood slowly started drifting in from underneath the door. At some point, I don't know when, everything is more or less a blur, Caleb finally got up on his feet. By now, things had quieted down. Even the music had stopped playing. Had the creature left, or was it still roaming around somewhere in the building? I sat still, watching Caleb as he inched his way slowly towards the door. Once there, he put his ear to it and listened. I got up too and stood next to him, pressing my ear to the door as well. Still quiet. I glanced at him, but before I could say that we were in the clear, I suddenly heard something out there. Movement. Something or someone was scuffling around. They were limping, staggering painlessly on the blood-covered tiles while pushing its way through the debris of dead bodies. I swallowed hard, reaching my hand towards my boy, and just as my fingertips grazed his shoulder, I heard a voice from the cafeteria. The voice of Amy. A cold shiver surged through me as Caleb opened his mouth.
Mom, we're in the bathroom.
Forcefully, I grabbed a hold of the collar of his costume and pulled him backwards, landing him hard on his tailbone. Then I wrapped one arm around him while covering his mouth with my left hand. I could tell he was in pain, but this was not the time for tears. At first he put up a fight, wriggling around, but eventually I managed to calm him. That's when I heard that horrible thing coming closer. It was as if it knew it had all the time in the world. From the sound of it, it was no longer bipedal. Instead, it seemed to crawl across the floor, using multiple appendages, traversing the threshold into the kitchen area. At this point, I could feel that Caleb had soiled himself. Both our hearts were beating almost in succession. I knew nothing of this thing, where it had come from and what it was capable of, but I prayed that it couldn't hear our heartbeats. It had stopped, and once again it spoke, using Amy's voice. This time, however, it sounded more hollow, as if the thing somehow knew that its prey was close by, and therefore it no longer needed to perfect its mimicry. Caleb did not notice, as he yet again tried to break away from my grasp, but I managed to restrain him. Time dragged by, but eventually the creature left the kitchen area. We were safe, for now. Before removing my hand, I whispered to Caleb that he had to be quiet and not so much as utter a peep. He nodded, to which I gingerly uncovered his mouth. Our eyes met. His was red from crying. As I was about to dry his wet cheeks, he suddenly whispered,
Why are we hiding from Mommy?
I swallowed hard, but the lump in my throat refused to go away. The day had finally come. Tears started to form in my eyes. God, it hurt so bad, but I couldn't keep it up anymore. I struggled to get the words out.
That's not Mommy.
But I heard her.
Caleb protested.
Caleb.
He would hate me for the rest of his life, but it was worth it. It would be a hard blow. However, I was willing to do everything in my power to prevent that thing from ever toying with his feelings again. The lie had to die.
Mom, she doesn't exist. She's not watching over us. She's gone.
A part of me was ready to wrestle him down if he made it for the door, but he just looked at me, vacantly. It was as if the last glimmer of hope, that last light, died inside of him then and there. I had murdered his mother and ripped her away from him. I hated myself, but then again, no amount of lying could protect us from that unspeakable thing that was still out there. Slowly, without even as much as sobbing, he shut his eyes and wordlessly crept into my arms. That must have been 3 or 4 hours ago, I don't know. Everything's a blur at this point. The batteries on my phone are almost dead, and I still can't seem to send messages or make calls. Sometimes, I can make out faint voices in the distance. At times, it reminds me of Sam and Alex. Other times Chrissy or Kelly. I think I even heard Nora at some point. I think it's experimenting, trying to figure out which disguise works to lure in prey. A while ago, I heard it climbing around on the roof. Not sure if it's trying to find a way inside. Thankfully, the bathroom has no windows, only a small vent. Caleb is sleeping. It's almost as if he's entered some sort of catatonic state. He doesn't seem to react to anything outside the bathroom, not even the voice of his mother. I got no idea how big this is, but based on what I heard when I talked to Paul, there are possibly more of them. What even are they? Extraterrestrials? Demons? Something else entirely? And how the hell are they able to mimic our loved ones? I don't understand. Whatever the case, no one has come to our aid. No police, no military, no nothing. It scares me to death thinking about it, but it feels as if we've been forgotten, abandoned. But who knows? Maybe the government has put our town under quarantine. I'm saying this because I thought I might have heard a helicopter at some point. I don't know. It's hard to tell what I'm hearing sometimes. Maybe I just imagined it. I'm so tired now. Think I'm going to try and sleep, or at least rest with one eye open. But truth to be told, I don't think we're going to make it, unless a miracle happens. When or if that thing returns, I hope it takes us in our sleep. Hopefully, when we're both dreaming of Amy. That way, even if it's a dream, we would at least die together as a family.